Hi, Frank. I know, it's great. I'm trying it out.
Oh, this new?
Yeah, it's a new toy.
Hello, sir. How are you? Oh,
Yeah, and it comes off.
You met Ted Ellis? Oh, yeah.
I didn't know.
But Ted's on the Parks and Rec Commission.
Yeah. So he and I were chatting about the woodlot, and I appreciate his laugh. You know, kind of some doctors.
He's a valuable.
Yeah, he's a good guy. So we had a friend of mine, who was the regional manager for Forest Stewardship Council of Canada.
Yeah.
Really
No trail stuff.
stuff like that. And I think there's more you could do. But, and I've been talking to the Minister for Forestry. It's just another one of those communications.
Yeah.
You need to get people just talking.
Yeah.
We just go for a walk.
A lot of prevention ministries.
Yeah. But even, even our Parks and Rec Commission, people who are concerned about the trail. I don't know if they'll walk the trails.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would want. I think they do a lot by not yelling at each other, but at least expressing concern. Because there's lots you could do. Yeah. Good, better. She had her eye surgery and that's really improved.
How about you?
All my stroke stuff is.
Windows 8.
That's what's great.
Did you have a
No, nothing. No, I'm just on.
Sorry,
Blood pressure, big stroke.
Yeah.
And that's all linked with that.
Your mom?
Yeah. My mom, yeah. Alzheimer's is progressing and everything. So, the overall, parents. My dad died in December.
Yeah.
So, he's got through the grieving process. Several times a week I talk to him today. Just get kind of down to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Sister-in-law died. Oh, so other house. I went, oh yeah, I went hospital. Right now. So I went back. Spent 2 weeks with them. I know, I was on the phone for weeks and got a phone call from you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She said, oh, and that now just.
These travel agents go on. What we do, yeah.
That's why they created
Doctor's wife. Really good.
Yeah, that's what we
Idea? why we don't meet at 5.
Because of the sun?
That's the only one. I'm here with Patrick. No, this is after I'm leaving on January the 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's just massive. It's not on. Okay, call for meeting to order for the committee of the whole, February 16th, 2015. With regards to the agenda, Deputy Chief Marmot is delayed at work, so he will be coming, but, so what I would like to do is in terms of the agenda itself is to just shift the order a little bit. So basically moving delegations down to either below unfinished business and or when Deputy Chief Marmot arrives with regards to his presentation for the fire department. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay. Man. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? We have a motion to approve with the reordering. Councillor Savage, and Councillor Coulson, discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So the first item that we'll consider then will be the adoption of January 19th, 2015 meeting. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, so it gets us down to reports. 2015 grants and aid applications. We received 2. Thank you. Tell staff.
Yeah, for potential conflict of interest for the American Therapeutic Writing.
Councillor Scott, are you intending to stay out for both of them, or?
Sure.
Okay, it's your choice.
Whatever's easier.
And I'm sorry, Councillor Scott, I couldn't hear you from over here. The general reason?
Since last time my daughter works.
We will consider these 2 items separately, so that Councillor Scott just, as I believe, mentioned conflict in regards to the first one. So if we want to consider with regards to the grant and aid applications, as mentioned, 2 applications came in prior to the deadline. We want to consider these items separately. So the first one is the Arrington Therapeutic Riding Association. So it's council's will and desire with regards to it. Do they need any additional information? Councillor Savage.
Thank you. Yeah, just a comment. I'm happy to support both of these. Just in terms of the Arrington Therapeutic, I would have liked to have seen what specifically they can use the money for. It may be difficult with the type of program. I don't know. But, you know, the Boys and Girls Club have identified specifically what they're going to use the funds for. So I don't appreciate other councillors' input. You know, it may be difficult with the type of program they're running, but it's a comment.
Okay. Councillor Haynes.
Just a comment also, just that every year for the last 3 years, we've talked about these have really been the only 2 grant and aid applications we get. And they're almost becoming annual budget line items for us. Every year we gave both of them last year, the year before, and I believe the year before that. So I thought our policy spoke to the ongoing of getting grants or.
Just been reading in terms of the policy which was included in the agenda package itself. There is some aspect of primary purpose. There's a policy section, section there. In terms of, it says primary purpose of the grant is to provide financial assistance to an organization for a specific project or event that benefits the residents of the District of Lansdowne. I do believe when it was originally created, there was some discussion and concern about kind of annual applications from people, but I don't see it actually being encompassed directly in the policy itself. Councilor Coulson?
Along that thread, in their written submission, they mentioned 40 riders, several were from Lansdale, so it's not clear actually how many of the participants are from that, so that would be nice to understand, I think.
Okay. Further discussion? For myself, in terms of this policy, there was concern when it was originally created about things becoming, as Councilor Haynes kind of pointed out, regular line items effectively with the regular applications. Now, some years there's been a little more competition for it, there's been more applications, so in some cases full amounts haven't been granted, and it's well within the council's prerogative to reduce the amount actually given separate from what's being supplied. Where my concern comes in relates to the policy where it says for a specific project or event that benefits the residents of Lansdowne. And something in terms of the Arrington one where it is general in nature with regards to the request. It doesn't necessarily, it just basically says their program as opposed to a specific project or event. The Boys and Girls Club has always specifically identified the items that money is going to go towards, as opposed to the program in general. So the lack of specificity on part of the Arrington is a bit of a concern for myself. Now, having said that, basically we need some council direction with regards to it, and I'd like to consider these two items separately if we could, so we could bring Councillor Scott back in. Councillor Cole?
Sorry, one more. I noticed last year, I believe they asked for $1,000 and received 500. Is that, and then they've had prior years, has that been comparable amounts, $500, or is it?
Councillor Miller?
I expect it's probably just a lack of sophistication in making the grant application. I've spoken to the representatives of the Arrington Riding Association in the past, and we've certainly received materials on the benefit that the opportunity to be in the stable, ride horses with the appropriate supports gives for their participants, including some Lansdale residents. Granted, I don't think it's a large number, but then when you're looking at the kind of clientele that that they would have, in a town of 3,600 people, perhaps there wouldn't, there wouldn't be a lot of necessarily a lot of uptake in that in the first place. And I think for providing this opportunity for even a handful of people in Lansdale, I think that's a good thing. My preference would be to request, as mentioned at the beginning, some additional information and ask if there is a specific project that this money is getting directed to. And I expect that this is probably just something of a lack of sophistication in preparing the application.
So is that a request for additional information? Because we can, I don't believe there's a specific date we need to approve these by.
No. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So currently there's no motion on the floor. So if what we could do is have the committee direct staff or recommend the staff get further information with regards to the use of the funds for the Arrington Therapeutic Riding Association, and I might suggest also adding further clarity on the number of residents that benefit from it, as opposed to several. Okay. I wasn't actually making a motion, just kind of a suggestion. Okay, but I added to.
I can.
Council Member?
I'll make that motion.
With the addition about the several?
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine.
Moved by Councilor Milbank, seconded by Councilor Hain. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thanks, Tom.
Are we-
Okay, Councillor Scott, we're still on the grants and aid application, specifically at the Boys and Girls Club.
Took that long for the first time.
We separated them out. So basically, what does the committee wish to do with regards to the second application, which was the Boys and Girls Club? Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, I'll move, again, I have a concern about the ongoing nature of it, but I'm gonna move that the committee of the whole recommended council that council approve a grant made in the amount of $500 to the Boys and Girls Club of Central Vancouver Island for the purchase of the new equipment as listed and to help foster learning and play with the program participants.
Second, second by Councillor Carson. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Haynes?
They're specific about their needs. It's a third of what they're asking approximately. So in that case, I can help, but perhaps we could, maybe council can talk about in the future about the ongoing applications for, or grant applications for people that come year after year after year. Perhaps we can review our policy.
Councillor Scott?
I agree somewhat with the Councillor Haynes was saying. The ongoing nature, if it's an ongoing nature every year, then it should be it shouldn't be a grant need. So I think we have to look at that and advertise about the policy.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Okay, which gets us to the unfinished business of the district financial 5-year financial plan. We've got updated financial reports with regards to the budget and 5-year plan. Staff has incorporated changes with regards to some adjustments to wages as well as some one-time projects, including the welfare management plan as discussed previously by council. We include transfer and equity. Now, what we're looking for is recommendations to council regarding special request items to be included in the next draft of the 5-year financial plan. That's the request within the report. Just kind of prior to this, I just like to kind of mention something. Actually, just if I might ask a quick question of Jetta. In the previous financial plan last year, the 2014, was the projected tax increase for 2015 not 2% as opposed to 3%?
Yeah, I believe it was incorporated at 2%.
So, maybe just leading off of the question, why was it bumped to 3%?
Well, it's just reflective of what has changed during the year and expecting what our new council priorities and changes in costs that may have been unexpected when 2015 was incorporated. Certainly, we always look more directly at those current year and trying to come up with the best cost estimates each year. The subsequent 4 years are kind of best guesses and reasonable estimates. So I can't say it was specifically one item. I think it's just general, looking at what we need in that core financial plan and what's come before and requested by council during this last year since the creation of the last financial plan.
Thank you. So just as kind of a preamble to our discussions here, effectively in the financial plan right now, between the tax increase to the residents directly as well as the extra non-market type adjustment that's put in each year, it's effectively a 3.5% increase in the tax requisition split up amongst different parties. Vancouver Island, the inflation rate for 2014 was approximately 1%. In terms of it, in 2011, there was a 0% tax increase with a 0.5% related to the non-market side of things. At the time, it was said that it was because it was an election year, that sort of a thing was done. But in fact, what it was, at the time I spent analyzing the budget history and identified that there were significant amounts in the budget which were not being expended each year, and the council had never been challenged to address that. Looking forward from where we are right now, we've got some significant budgetary challenges that aren't necessarily in this financial plan. Fire chief's position with regards to it, and depending on what option we look at with regards to it, it could have implications in the range of $70,000 to $80,000 a year. There's a discussion with regards to water agreement. When it comes to the water agreement, in order to implement that, it includes payments with regards to economic development and the port theater, $50,000 plus. Staff increases have been incorporated into these budgets. Those items alone total more than $100,000 of spending that's not currently in the financial plan. There's always going to be more demands than we have money for. But when it comes to it, the question to me is, when it comes to those demands, are they something that will directly maintain or enhance the daily lives of our existing landfill residents? The easiest approach is to raise taxes. We're putting a challenge up to council with regards to limiting that tax increase. Personally, from my standpoint, the 0.5% with regards to the non-market side, sure we'll call it that, plus 0.5% from tax revenue to take it to the 1% is frankly where I'd like to see things. So when we're considering these special requests or considering the budget as a whole, I want to keep that side of things in mind, because what quite often happens is people look at the special requests in isolation and they consider the effect, they don't necessarily consider the effect it would have on the overall budget. They just look at whether or not that item is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't think there's anything in the suggestions on the part of what's come forward from staff that anything could be labeled a bad thing. It's a question of affordability, it's a question of benefit to the residents. And I do recognize that that is something that's subjective. So with that little preamble, is there anything else individual council members would like to say? Councilor Milbank?
I strongly disagree with your characterization of the 3%, 3.5% with the non-market. I would characterize that as a tax increase. Certainly if we find ways to increase tax revenue, in this case by eliminating some permissive tax exemptions or obtaining further tax revenue from businesses that are successful or expanding, then I think that that's not something that should be characterized by a tax increase. So in that respect, I disagree with your comments. On the side of expenditures, certainly I'm going to be sharpening my pencil, and I'm not particularly comfortable with the 3% tax increase. And there's going to be things in the course of this budget season where I'm just going to say no, and I expect other councillors are going to do that as well.
Councilor Hain?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. One, just a general comment. When you look at the property tax line from 2014 to 2015, it's clearly a 3.5%. That is what we're taxing the residents. There's no denial on that. I really hope we focus in reality. We all have a wish list of what we hope we'll see happen out there, but we do prepare our tax notices and they go out to the residents in June. So we can't hope what's going to happen out there. We got to deal with what we know we have and where our current economic circumstances are. There are a number of items that I've been working on that I think we can identify to deal with. And taking what the mayor said to heart, just knowing the past processes, what I'd like to do if we can is identify the issues, all the things that we think we'd like or have value or merit in the budget, put them all out there and then go through it individually. We seem to do a divide and conquer approach. We basically approve one item and then we move and accept it. We do another item until we get to the end. It'd be nice if we could just hold off on approving it all until we see the big picture instead of doing this piecemeal approach. That's what I'd like to see. Can we do it that way?
We can do it whatever we want.
Well, just so we know where we're at, it's basically looking at the whole pie instead of chopping it up all the time.
Councilor Coulson?
So we have to modify our process then, in a way, right? We have to set a target tax rate and then table everything, prioritize, and then once we hit our number, we're done.
Right.
That's the way we have to approach that.
Or cut some things.
That's the thing.
If I could just comment on that, I guess what we tried to do with the first draft was give you all the pieces. So I'm not sure what changed in the process other than setting a tax rate in advance, but that's what we have tried to do, unlike many years ago when the first meeting would have a couple things, the second meeting. The first meeting is meant to say, here's everything for your consideration, special requests for budget, capital projects that are under consideration. So like tonight, there's nothing new here. We're just reflecting some of council's direction. But obviously those pieces that come forward at the first are for incorporation, and that is the whole picture. So I'm misunderstanding perhaps what it is, what other things you would want to see to be able to look at that.
So just to follow up on that though, we don't have, which we know is gonna happen, is the QP wage increase. That's not in the budget, that really should be in here. So we have a sense of where we're at. We know what other areas are approving. So realistically, it's a retroactive wage amount. So we really should be putting that in the budget.
Should be addressed in council.
Oh, sorry, but those are the things I think need to get in.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I agree. The 3%, I think we should potentially be looking at reducing that. What it should actually be, whether it's 1%, 2%, I think we have discussions there. One of the challenges that we have, though, is that I think everybody has to consider that it's not us alone. It's all levels of government, I guess. We look at the regional district, they're proposing a 7% increase for Landscope. We look at the library board, they're proposing a 5.22% increase. So those are pretty significant increases. And I'm not saying that we should be going there, but part of the challenge that we face is there's continually new requirements for us to do things, whether it's the new fire regulation stuff, whether it's other things, water standards, whatever the case may be, there's continually new regulatory requirements, but there's costs to it. And it's not like a lot of times we're not staying in inflation because we have these additional requirements that we now have to do that we never had to do before. So that adds an additional cost on things. So I don't know how we deal with that, but it's a reality. And if we are at a zero or a purely inflationary number, whatever we say it's 1% or 2% or whatever the case may be, we are actually in some cases going backwards because there are additional things that we have to spend dollars on within our budget that we didn't have to before. So we therefore have less dollars all the time because we have new items that we have to deal with within existing budgetary constraints. I don't have an answer, but I'm just stating a reality.
Well, and in terms of that, like for example, the RDN budget, and just for your information, I was going to cover it off in the next meeting, but right now landfill's down to a 5.6%. We've beaten up some of the transit stuff and that, so that's coming down. But having said that, one of the budgetary formats that the RDN uses is it identifies the potential increase, but there's a column beside that makes reference to changes in service levels. And that changes in service levels in some cases is some form of extra benefit to the residents, such as increased transit service, that sort of an aspect. Or some of those changes in reporting requirements, that sort of aspect would then be separately identified. So you could see what was kind of a cost of living increase, if you want to call it that, separate from the service increase, or in some cases decreases. So that might provide that extra little bit of information. Tom?
I just wanted to comment on QP wages that haven't been incorporated. It's difficult to include, yes, we know what other jurisdictions are settling for, but we have yet to be communicated with that we will be entering into negotiations. So to include a figure that represents what's being negotiated in other places, it's essentially, showing our hand even before we go into negotiations. So staff did discuss trying to incorporate some sort of compensation increase that would reflect that, but found it difficult in the absence of, as I say, going into negotiations or even having council direction as to what to include in there at this particular point.
Councillor Savage?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just piggybacking on what Councillor Scott had to say. I think my sense is, and I speak personally, I'm comfortable with the tax increase that keeps us ahead of the game, or at least level with the game. You know, we've heard, you know, RDN increases are going, library increases are going, hydro's a big number, I think it's something like 11 to 12%. So we got to be careful that, you know, if we establish a tax increase, that we're not in effect falling behind. And you know, that if we do that, there's a catch-up. There's definitely a catch-up by the next year, the year after, or sometime in the future. That's the balance I think we have to try and find. Whether we should start it the other way around and say, what percentage tax increase do we feel comfortable living with, and then work the budget backwards. You know, that's another way of approaching it, I guess. To me, 1% is it's avoiding the fateful day, personally.
Councillor Coulson?
So we can go into broader macroeconomic discussions at the club, I think, but and when you look at a broad enough time frame, you know, these percentages are not sustainable. Hydro cannot keep pushing a 10% increase through when real incomes are decreasing, right? And you know, when an average pay increase for a resident out there is maybe 1%, that's the target I think we should keep in mind for Quebec, to be less than that. You know, the fact that the RDN's pushing through big increases, that's not sustainable when you look at large enough time frame. It's not sustainable, and that train will come to an end at some point. Anyways, that's my viewpoint. Regarding the budget that's presented, there's a few ways to go with that, in my thinking. You know, the way we do it, and you add on, or can we start with an all-in? So you add all the special request items, you add an estimate of wage increases, and so you have kind of a worst-case forecast figure, and then you pare it down to something that everyone agrees on is realistic. So just a few different ways to tackle.
Councillor Noble?
Well, we know that a 1% tax increase is roughly $15,000, so I'm sure I'm not the only one, but when you're going through the special request items and unknown items like QP, and you're thinking of the scenarios in your head, it's not too much of a stretch to calculate what the impact is going to be on the bottom line. So I mean, I've been completely comfortable with the process with you so far. I have an idea in my head, the kind of tax endpoint I would like to get to, and I'm sure that other members of council do as well, and kind of see how it goes and what's reasonable. And you know, I think it's what's being proposed is very similar to the process we already have.
Okay. Councillor Savage?
Yeah, just a question on page 67 of the financial, no, 67 of the agenda. We got that. So that's the total district surplus of deficit. So it's showing that as of 2014, there is a surplus of 289,631. So is that not sort of discretionary? Could we not apply that to some of our budgetary items?
You know, keep in mind that some of those surpluses are related to specific funds. So your ability to use it in general could be limited depending on what fund that is coming from.
But, you know, maybe I'd like to know what that is.
Okay.
So that that's something we can work on.
Isn't that the carry forward?
Jen? Graham was making reference to the 289,631. It's on page 67.
Right.
Makes reference to the surplus and the ability to utilize that.
Yeah, well, historically, council has used, that essentially will fall into what we refer to it as prior year surplus or accumulated surplus. You know, in a business sense, that would be the net income for the year. This is a preliminary number that doesn't reflect reductions for depreciation and other audit adjustments that are kind of non-cash in nature. That said, prior years and prior councils have allocated that amount for a variety of things, whether it's one-time projects, whether it's a reduction in the current tax rate, whether it's allocations to reserves. Last year, for example, we pulled an amount out of prior year surplus to establish the winter road maintenance reserve. So I think best practices around those prior year surplus numbers revolve around using it for special or one-time items. That said, for a newer municipality or for an organization organization that perhaps has significant capital costs upcoming, it also provides working capital for the district. So there's a variety of ways it can be allocated. That said, theoretically, yes, it could be allocated towards a project or anything at council's discretion.
Thank you. Okay, further discussion? Yes, Councilor Paul.
Sorry, I had one more. In revision control of these plans, I noticed several of the expenditure items had changed. They had changed versus the last one we've seen. General government services, for example, some of them changed almost $30,000.
So that was related to the wage changes and making the decision to just reflect it at what it is now, subject to council's discretion on those QP increases. And then there was, of course, the change in the planner, flowing that through all the years. So that adjustment in the current year, which then gets adjusted and calculated out for the subsequent years.
That was just one of them. I noticed probably half a dozen had changed, so that's similar type of
It is just the
exercise.
wages, yeah. And then there was the wellfield management, like, are you, in the report, page 47 of the agenda, it discusses what those changes were to the current year, being the planner wages, some adjustments to wages and benefits, and then the reflection of the wellfield management plan, which was an increase in expenditures, but an equivalent amount of increase from transfer from primary to surplus. So that's a net zero on the bottom line, but each of those line items would change. But when there's a change in 2015, often it results in a change in the years out where we are estimating those related costs for those years.
Right, because wages are allocated in different funds and then,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Further comments? I'll just kind of make a couple more comments based on some things. First off, with regards to the QP side and not incorporating that, there are public contracts out there. We know we're going to have a wage increase. QP knows that we're going to have a wage increase. So to put it at zero to me, I mean, whether somebody ends up putting it at 1% or 2% or 1.5% or whatever, I don't think is showing our hand in any way, shape, or form. This is information that's publicly accessible. The discussion and debate with regards to the budget is public. And so in that regard, I don't think we're hiding anything. The reason for me issuing the challenge with regards to the tax increase, over the last couple of years, effectively the district has added a full-time planner position. It's gone from a part-time, occasional contract position of actually two positions, the approving officer and the planner, to a full-time position. On top of that, we've had positions where effectively the wage increase related to the position is approximately 40%, just shy of 40%. And yet at the same time, tax increases have not been substantial. And so there was, for want of a better term, fat within the budget to be able to absorb that without major tax increases, or angst, if you want to call it that. The other part is, we look at that surplus that's there, and if it was this case that the surplus was because of projects that did not get done, and now aren't being done, otherwise it would have been considered part of the carry forward, that again raises the question with regards to the budgeting side as to whether we're budgeting based on needs or budgeting based on what we believe we can collect. And in terms of it, that's one of the dangers, is to say, okay, well, this is the amount of money that we have, so let's find ways to spend it. And everybody makes jokes about government, about utilizing it before the end of the budget term, which I've never seen a case of here. So, in my opinion, there are opportunities to decrease the spending to reach those goals. Does it have impacts? Yes. But like I said, we need to base it on the needs of the residents and the ability of the residents to pay, as opposed to just what we can collect and what we can spend. In terms of sustainability, utilizing surplus for anything related to regular operating, in my mind, is not sustainable, so it should not be done. Even when it comes to the special projects, sooner or later, in theory, you run out of those surplus monies. So it should be a case that each budget year should, at best, stand on its own. So that's my reasoning for the challenge. Councillor Scott.
Just a comment on that, and I'm not disagreeing, but the one thing I think we have to consider is we have to have a balanced budget. So we always budget conservatively, and Lanceville has done that for ever since I have been involved 20 some odd years ago with the improvement district. So we've always budgeted conservatively, even both our capital projects and our operating, because essentially we're forced to, for lack of a better expression. And I'm sure there would be a lot of upset people too if we were coming in with projects that were significantly over budget. So I think we're always going to be in this position. As I say, I'm not disagreeing, but I think we're always going to be in this position, and I think it's prudent to budget conservatively and to have excess funds left over at the end versus the other way around and have shortfalls.
And as an accountant, we're always accused of being conservative. But, and I'll tell you the same thing that, for example, I tell my master's students at the university. Don't use conservatism as a reason for lack of research, discussion, and efforts in trying to achieve the best outcome. And when we look at it in terms of the general surplus, $212,000 on revenue of 1.5, which is the taxation revenue. There are other sources of taxation revenue. Pretty sizable cushion. And so what I'm asking is for council to work on making the efforts to making the budget process closer to what the actual expenditures are, and thereby limiting the tax increase to the residents at this point. Councillor Savage.
Just to follow to my previous comment, just on that surplus item, I mean that is monies that have been collected through taxes, and for sure, well, in my opinion, we should use some of that money if we can to defray cost increase at this time. I think also within that amount of money, there's opportunities to look over our shoulder for what's going to happen with the fire department and the fire chief, and rainy day projects and maybe some special projects. But I think we should look seriously about that amount of money and how we can best utilize that.
Okay, Councillor.
This is my last comment, and I agree that we will use some of it, obviously, because we're going to need it. I think what we have to make the distinction between is ongoing operating costs and one-time capital costs. We funded the planner last year out of a prior year surplus, but payroll is an ongoing operating cost. Unless we intend to fire them at the end of the year, we know we're going to have that wage again the next year. So we can't budget for those ongoing wages out of a prior year surplus. We're fooling ourselves. It's not sustainable, because then, okay, all we've done is put off that tax increase to the next year, because that surplus won't be there then. So that, to me, is the important part, is making the distinction between what is operating and what is capital or one time, and using the money accordingly. Right?
Okay. Okay, so on the agenda itself, we've got 3 bullets there under number 5, unfinished business. Maybe let's deal with the first one there, which is the 2015-2019 financial plan detailed draft number 2. And previously, we kind of went through department by department, so I'm not proposing that we do that this time. Whether or not there's specific areas within the financial plan as represented before we get to the special requests in that, the council needs further information on, or clarification or comment. So it's open to council members to address whatever page you want to be. We're not going to go through it line by line. So
it's specifically talking the special request action?
No, not the special request, but whether or not within the financial plan as it exists, whether there's additional questions or concerns that people may have, and then separately we'll look at the special request. Councillor Colson? No? Okay, Councillor Melvin.
If I could look at page 57, it's under protective services. This is probably going to occupy quite a bit of our time. So, yeah. So I think this is part and parcel of the sort of the development and evolution of Lanceville as a municipality, is looking at whether or not it's cheaper and more effective to contract services out, or whether it's cheaper and more effective to bring them in. One of the things I'm interested in is bylaw enforcement. We have a contract with the RDN for $24,000, and emergency preparedness, we have a contract for $24,000. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but how many municipalities contribute to the emergency preparedness function?
Municipalities.
Sorry, or regional districts?
The electoral areas.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. I would have to look at all that are participating in that. I would assume all of them are within the region.
They're mandated to have that function, and it is provided through the RDN.
Yeah.
So maybe next meeting, if we could get an idea of what the other electoral areas and municipalities contribute, because I think that there's the figures for the new fire chief are certainly something that's a little bit, causes some concern when you're looking at it as just adding an extra on top. But I think that the figures, bylaw enforcement, that's a contract for $24,000, and emergency preparedness, that's a contract for $24,000. There's probably some opportunity there in order to combine some functions, and I just wonder if maybe in the next go around we could get some additional information about what the what is incorporated into those, and for emergency preparedness, certainly which other municipalities contribute, and electoral areas, and what their contributions are.
Twyla, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't looked at the contracts recently in great detail, but I believe for building inspection, bylaw enforcement, and emergency preparedness, the rate that we pay is based on the same rate that the electoral areas contribute to.
I believe that's correct. Yes. But I'll just look to see what that amount is. It doesn't equate to the exact figure that we have, because it's based on a combination of population or assessment. I'd have to look at the
Yeah, I
contract.
can't, some of them are based on a combination of
Exactly.
assessment population, depends on function by function. Additional items, anybody needs clarification, questions on? Councilor Heath?
Sorry, just so I know, through you to staff, does the, under revenue from owned sources, or miscellaneous revenue, sorry. Oh, so never mind, I got my answer. So just, sorry, I do have a question. Given that we're gonna have the recovery of these legal fees every year, are we gonna show this every year as a miscellaneous revenue source? Because I see it go down quite a bit in 2016 and 2015, and theoretically, we're showing full legal costs. But shouldn't we be showing the recovery of any legal fees also at the same time?
We may not necessarily be recovering legal fees, depends on when the item wraps up.
But we're budgeting the legal expense based on all the detail.
Yeah, we don't know what those legal fees will be in advance.
But we're budgeting the full legal expense, but we're not budgeting for the recovery.
We've consistently, I think, budgeted about 40,000 every year, with the exception of a couple years ago where we had allocated 60, and that was to deal with another issue that was ongoing for a particular year. But pretty much history shows that we've always budgeted 40,000 for a legal.
So I got the numbers, but I can get them for you.
Yeah.
Councilor Colson?
Sorry. Are we at the point where we can start like whittling down things if we, or are we just asking questions of the overall thing?
I figured we could ask individual questions with regards to the financial plan instead of before we get into the
Okay.
detail.
So question then, page, sorry, I'm looking at my older copy. Regarding election expenses, so $15,000 in 2018.
Page 55 of the existing agenda.
Page 55, yeah. So curious why that item's in there. I understood that wasn't paid out anymore because of the role that Trudy now offers.
No, that would be the cost to print the ballots, to have staff working at the election, for training related to the election. There's a whole variety of costs related that are separate from staff
Okay,
costs.
that's not
Yeah.
staff costs.
Okay. Councilor Newgrave, so we're on item 5A of the agenda. We're just right now addressing any individual questions people have about the financial plan in general, as opposed to the specific items.
Thank you. Again, my apologies for arriving late.
Okay, Councilor Coulson again.
Sorry, I do have another one. So when I took the live spreadsheet that was offered and I tallied everything up, I tried to relate it back to Schedule A. And so found that the numbers didn't match exactly. There was discrepancies on almost everything. Sometimes small, other times, several $20,000–$30,000.
Schedule A being the bylaw?
Sorry?
Schedule
Yeah,
A being the
yes.
bylaw?
Yes. Yes. You see that?
Yeah, I couldn't hear.
Oh, the Schedule A is out of the bylaw itself.
Yeah, or I thought that was the Schedule A, that table up front.
Yes?
Yeah. So, general government services, I'll go to that one. I tallied up the numbers and couldn't map it directly back to this detail. Is there some translation that happens in between?
Well, certainly the Schedule A, which is essentially the bylaw, is consolidated. So for example, if there's sales of services, there may be sales of services in each of the funds, water, sewer, and revenue, for example, or general, for example. On the bylaw, it's reported on a consolidated basis. So you would have to pick up those numbers on each fund that carries forward here. That said, some of the numbers carry directly to the bylaw. For example, the return on investments of $40,000, it comes directly out of the general fund because it's only reflected in the general fund. So I guess if you wanted to provide me with your discrepancies at some point, I could try and help you walk through that, but I'm not sure.
Sure, because what I was essentially wanting to do is be able to work at the level of the plan and then see how that cascaded back to the more rolled up version in Schedule A. And
part of the theory between the bylaw is because the district is required to stay within its bylaw parameters, you wouldn't, in essence, want to have 100 lines on your bylaw, right? It would really restrict. So it's tried to be in the same groupings that are on our financial statements that are kind of generally accepted. So I think probably the issue is more that they're reflected in 3 different funds, which doesn't accumulate in the detail directly. You have to pull from each of the funds to get to here.
okay.
Councilor Scott.
Just a question for staff, on page 66, in terms of the water fund. And I was noticing on it that the wages and benefits and professional fees have been increased substantially, and just questioning why.
So with respect to wages and benefits, based on work plans for the coming year, a higher percentage was allocated to the water fund based on director of works. With respect to professional fees, the subnote there just refers to previously there's been $10,000 total in consulting in public works. We find that every year, at least half of that is related to water. So this year it was just decided we would put 5,000 of it directly to water rather than picking it up in an inter-fund transfer and 5,000 in the general fund. So
it's just being reallocated.
It's just been reallocated from general. There's no net increase.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Councilor Hain.
But just following up on that, just so I'm clear, but there is an increase to the water users. So they're getting hit with the bigger wage costs. Do we track the actual wages and project time, like our staff putting their actual time down for project? Or are they just doing it generally, saying, I worked here for a day? Like we could see actual timesheets and show.
Timesheets do allocate to each of the funds, and whether it's like of an operating nature or if there are capital projects, there is an allocation to capital projects if appropriate. More often than not, it's a contract that's on those, but if there is specific capital coming up, codes for them.
Okay, so they're putting the actual one project they're working on.
Yeah.
Okay, any further general questions or comments? Councilor Newman.
Thank you. And I apologize if you've dealt with it already, but I believe it's on page 60.
It's the, from the Parks and Recreation Commission, which is referenced in another report, which I believe we'll be dealing with later. It's the $15,000 for the preserved tree character concept. Has that been discussed at this point?
Not here.
Okay, so at some point, are we going to be discussing what to do with this amount?
Councillor Hain?
Well, Parks and Rec made the motion to council, which you probably see, to take that out and pass it back to council.
Right,
Well, that'll be this council's issue.
right. Okay, so, and are we going to be discussing that later on?
I think this is for tonight's meeting.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so if we can get into the special requests, which is starting on page 72, the cover sheet of the agenda. We'll just kind of go with them in order. Note that with regards to each of the individual items, they've got the funding source, funding amount, and percentage increase, percentage effect on property taxes. So the first item is an asset management plan. Well, sorry, Councilor.
Before we start those, could we hear the presentation? Or do you want to wait till after?
John's here now. Council, would like to hear the fire department presentation now?
I think it's good enough as well, to see not to, so confused, so we will carry on to the
Okay. Okay, sorry. First item. Councilor Scott.
I don't think we have a choice in this particular item. I spent quite a bit of time talking with various individuals up at LGLA sessions, and essentially, if you're not doing this, you're not getting grants. So, essentially, they are, one of the primary things that we'll be looking at is ensuring that you have appropriate asset management programs in place. And basically, the government is using grants as a way to, let's say, encourage, I'll use the word force, municipalities to make sure, and I agree with it. I think it's probably, it's good long-term planning. And probably a lot of places aren't doing enough of it. I think we're probably ahead of the curve a little bit, but definitely if we're looking at grants, they are looking to be doing this stuff.
Further comments? Question to staff, is this a consultant's time, staff time? What is this cost?
So certainly one of the kind of first and perhaps most significant external costs, a lot of this can be done with staff time, is to get an updated appraisal of the district's assets, because that forms the basis then for determining replacement costs, which determines the basis for reserve transfers and things like that. So it's been a number of years since we've done that. Staff feels that that's, an important step in terms of going along this path. And then from then on, the most significant part of the asset management plan would be staff time for them to pull those plans together. So the request is mainly related to doing that appraisal, which costs estimates are $11,000. This grant is available for up to half of $10,000. So trying to take advantage of that grant funding to get that appraisal.
Councilor Savage?
So a question through you to Jetta. So does that assessment of civic properties include Bellland? Assessment of Bellland, it doesn't?
No.
It just physically
Just
proves.
the above ground assets.
Is there anywhere where our value of the lands we own, is that indicated anywhere in terms of an asset?
Well, it's certainly reflected in our financial plan at or our financial statements at historical cost. But certainly as we develop the asset management plans, it would be staff's intention, and the focus is more on current costs when you were looking at asset management plans. Our best kind of estimate of that is current assessments. We do still get BC assessments of our district properties. So that would be an ongoing part of that process, is looking more at the current costs on other assets.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Scott.
Question for the staff. Would this also, a side benefit of this, be for insurance purposes?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Colson?
Sorry, I thought I understood what assets meant. So you mentioned above ground, so like sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure is not part of it? So it's simply like roads, is roads part of that?
No, not roads.
Not
That-
that. Just buildings, lawn equipment,
Yeah, fire department equipment, fire department buildings. The thing with the sewer, water, roads replacement is that generally each year we have a project, and so we have current costs tendered, and so we're able to project those out on the various assets in our Excel spreadsheets for that. So that's probably not our highest concern on determining replacement costs. That's something our director of finance is able to do quite easily, just because each year we typically have those costs.
it's a fairly small list that we're talking for above ground, I'm assuming. Generally speaking.
About $10,000.
No, I'm just trying to get an idea of the scope of what we're looking at and what just makes sense for the below ground stuff.
Okay, so we're gonna have to provide direction to staff with regard to, I guess technically to council, with regards to each of these individual items. So if you wish to make some motion to incorporate or not incorporate into the financial plan. Councilor Starr.
Just a question on process. I can look into this a little bit to what Councilor Payne was saying before, and I think we're probably into this process too far to make a huge change. But maybe something we should consider for next year and do in combination with Councilor Payne and Councilor Grossman talking about, and start with everything thrown in and then start moving things out to get down to a number that everybody's satisfied with. Maybe a simpler process, and get some input from staff on that as to what they possibly would control. Having said that, I'll make the motion that this be included in the budget.
Second.
At this point in time.
Second by Councilor Meager, discussion. Councilor Hain.
We can always look at funding source later too, can we not?
In what respect?
Well, right now it's saying it's a net amount to taxation.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, so we could theoretically take this one-time item
Yeah.
out of the
That's what
surplus
it
There's
is.
some other,
So
most
in,
definitely.
so in a way, being this is a cow, we are gonna throw it all into the pot and then decide how to, what we're gonna pay for it, if we're gonna pay for it,
Or
or.
alternatively, if it creates a tax increase that's unpalatable to people, then that's something else gets through that.
Right.
If I could just offer, what we have done in prior years is taken the list of special requests that get approved by the committee to go to council, is I've summarized those in a table, just so that you can see what's kind of ongoing special request increases, what are one time, and so there's an opportunity to kind of see them all there if council wanted to go through a prioritization exercise, or at least it's summarized kind of in those categories so you can see the impact before making a final motion at the council meeting. So I know that that's been received well in the past.
Sorry, I heard Councillor Scott was moving right, but could not second.
Councilor Meager. Councilor Wilson.
Another one, what level of resolution does this go down to? And I'll just give a quick example, like, we don't go right down to pencils and erasers kind of thing.
What I've
Is there a
discussed,
capital amount or?
yeah, our capitalization policy dictates that amounts greater than $10,000 are capitalized, and below that are considered operating in nature. There's a subset of pooled assets, but that's a different story. So the appraisal would go down to that kind of ballpark of assets and provide.
Okay, any further? Nothing further, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Next item, the Emergency Social Services Team Leader Annual Honorarium. Actually, just looking for some direction on staff on this. Both myself and Councilor Hain are members of the Emergency Social Services Volunteer Group. Do you see any conflict with us participating in this discussion? We are not the team leader. Okay.
You know, you determine your own conflict, so if you think you have a
Okay,
conflict,
so
then.
based on that, I'm going to declare conflict based on the fact that I'm part of the Emergency Social Services team for the specific item.
I will do.
So that would be,
You guys figure out who's in charge.
Councillor Milbank, you're still an acting mayor.
Didn't go so well last time.
Maybe both.
Just give me a second to get through the third course. Or sorry, the special request items.
Page 75 of your things.
So as far as I understand, there's the emergency preparedness program has a emergency social services group, and I don't know anything other than what's in the request here. So the comments.
I'll comment on it. We are having a presentation by the RDN later this evening, I believe,
That's fine.
on this specific subject. So maybe this item we should just leave at the present time until we've heard from David.
So,
Yeah, I'll move that we table it.
no discussion on tabling, so all those in favor? No one opposed? That's it.
Okay. The next page, page 77 of your agenda includes a variety of items related to the fire department itself. So would this be the appropriate time, John?
Not at the moment, having some technical difficulties. Yeah, this is a newer version that we got up the road.
Okay. So in terms of it, there's a variety of items there. Let's just kind of deal with the first one, regards to the fire department, identifying the alternatives for replacing the fire chief. If you note, the amount requested has no specific item amount in there. There are 4 alternatives listed on the fire council. Councillor Scott.
What about we just leave this and move on to the other items and come back to it? I think it would be a lot better have a discussion after we've heard what the deputy farm has to say.
But I guess my hesitation in that is Deputy Chief Marmon, I don't believe is going to be commenting on the replacement of the fire chief.
Okay, is that, oh, you want, okay, okay. I was just looking at all the.
Yeah, you're looking at the other items?
Yeah, I was just trying.
Figure we can deal with this one without Deputy Chief Marmon's input. So, like I said, staff has put together 4 possibilities, recognizing currently we don't have a lot of information. What would we like to do in this regard? Councillor Scott.
Before I put a motion on the table, I'd just like to make some comments. And one of the things that I think we should consider is the staff would suggest a governance review, which would be bringing in somebody from the outside. I think we need to look at bringing in somebody. They can talk to council, they can talk to staff, they can meet with the fire department and meet with the members and get feedback from everybody, and then look at some potential options based on all that information as to how they see that going forward would be the best opportunity for the district. The reason I say that is I think we have to be very cautious. We have a lot of very dedicated volunteers in the community. It's come up before that people feel that the public feel that the fire department is part of the heart of the community. And I think we have to be very cognizant of that. So I think we have to tread very carefully moving forward. And that's why I suggest I think we need feedback from people. And we probably best to bring something in to do that so that everybody can have some input and feedback into it and hopefully help develop the best overall solution to go forward. Maybe that's some good comments again.
Councillor, is that a motion? Well, no, you can make a motion.
I was just going to have a discussion first.
Okay. Councillor Savage.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You know, I think there's other models out there that we might want to look at. I'm familiar with the model whereby the fire chief is also a bylaw officer. And they don't do building inspection, obviously, but they certainly do bylaw stuff, including dog control and bear watch. We don't have a problem here. But I think, that's probably something that may come out of the governance review. We should look at our options to see, get the best product for the community.
Councillor Hill?
I agree with Councillor Scott in his comments, but we need to tread lightly. And now if we're talking about a bylaw officer and an emergency preparedness officer, maybe we need a whole organizational governance review, which is what we saw at the strategic planning session. We needed a core, support for core review. So maybe we needed more at the whole organizational level, because we can't just pick a couple of areas. We should really be looking at the whole organization, see where we're at, see where we're heavy in staff, see where we're light in staff, see if we can do a reorganization or allocation of wages within the district.
Well, they specifically were talking about the IT tools.
Did you mention bylaw enforcement?
I did, in terms of the fire chief's roles and responsibilities.
Councillor Miller?
If we did go the route of a governance review through you to staff, do you have any idea what the timeline might be? Because I'm cognizant of the fact that we've got something of a July 30th, 2015 deadline, and I wouldn't want to go too far past that, and it's getting pretty tight.
If we're strictly just speaking about the fire department and not the whole organization review, I believe it's something that could be achieved in the time that Tom's identified that he'd be wanting to resign. Again, if it's just the fire department related.
And what would this, what would be in that symbol of what the consultant would do as part of the governance review?
I'm working on having those discussions. We haven't been able to do that yet. Just scheduling conflicts and having a chat with the potential individual that would carry it out.
Councillor Wolf?
So this is more of an operations really we're talking about, not so much governance, the existing structure. Is that a question? Well, bit of both, I guess. In my thinking, this is broader than just governance. It's looking at how the structure will work and getting feedback on what might work and cost, benefits, and so on. Okay. And sorry, I'll keep rounding if I may. Because when I look at the options that are presented here, status quo is one of them. And is that an option really? I mentioned this last time. If it's not an option, that changes the remaining set that we can consider.
That might be considered as something that we looked at if the review were to be carried out. And B, our fire chief is in the audience, and not to put Tom on the spot, but he may have a better idea if there's somebody internally in the department that's willing to step up and take that on a status quo basis. But
I can't say there's anybody that can frankly do it under the terms and conditions that I think one individual has identified himself as, and offer a plan for achieving the things we feel the department needs to advance to, but it comes with a wage, I'll see.
that would be the part-time.
Yeah.
Right.
We have a fairly limited selection here. There's no cost in the special request item. Option one, the full-time or part-time chief. I'd like to see a build-up of time so that we know, is it part-time, is it full-time, just the time commitments on an annual basis, and you can hone in on a salary. That kind of tightens up some details around that. Contracting out fire protection services. I'm curious where the 800,000 came from. My quick look at that was when I go to the Nanaimo fire protection budget, they have about $150 per capita. So if we draw that into Landsville, that equates to $550,000. Just trying to get my head around, fire protection services contracted out. So to jump to the point, a broader suite of options would be appealing to make a decision for them.
So a governance review would certainly assist in that. Staff struggle with because we find everything from advertisements that are currently out there with other municipalities looking for a full-time chief that range from $60,000 to $75,000. There's other full-time chiefs in neighboring jurisdictions that are making over $100,000, so not, significant population changes. That's where we don't know at this time whether Lanceville Fire Hall, can they operate under a part-time component, or do we require a full-time chief to meet all the obligations? Things are changing, and it's not so much the fact of actually fighting fires anymore, but more the administration and liability aspects and training and things of that nature. So a governance review would be very helpful in that regard to flush all that out. As far as the figure associated with contracting out, we did utilize the city of Venado as a comparable because they do contract out their services to a couple of electoral areas with similar populations. So we just basically what they charge for that. To do that, that's where we came up with that base figure.
Councilman.
Thank you. Yeah, I just would like to recap some of the points I've heard, and I agree that we do have a deadline of June 30th, which suggests to me that we shouldn't have a full program review at this point. That may be an option at a later date, but I think we have to recognize that we have to have some sort of a plan in place well before June 30th. I do think, though, part of governance review, and I am looking favorably upon a governance review, and I do think a major part of it should be linking the position to that liability and certification, which are becoming ever bigger and bigger aspect of emergency services. But again, I don't want to shoot down the idea of a full program review, because I think we could probably realize some real efficiencies there. But for the right now, I think we should be moving towards a governance review that wraps up with ample time that we can get somebody in place one way or another for June 30th.
So right now, we're kind of dealing with a big void of information. Councilor Scott.
I gotta make a motion.
Thank you.
That we direct, or I guess I make the motion that we direct council, to proceed with a governance review and bringing us a consultant with our.
Put a dollar figure on it, or?
Well, the estimated cost of $5,000. Obviously, we're not going to know the cost until we have something.
Second that motion. Second by Councilor Savage. Any further discussion? Councilor Haynes?
Just unclear, it's sort of governance and operational.
Yeah, I think it's looking at bringing in a new fire chief and what are the options dealing with all, as I mentioned earlier, obviously the terms of reference that have to be developed. And I think if council so desires, staff can give the terms of reference for comment. But I think the bigger thing is that we need to look at the fire hall and the operation of it, and we're in changing times, and how can we deal with that? What are some of the most appropriate models to deal with that? And get feedback from all involved, because I think it has to be an inclusive process, and I'm very cognizant of that.
Councilor Colson?
Yeah, good points. I would not like to see that it will preclude us from having a discussion on a broader closing for organization.
And you wouldn't, but it would deal with the BDC of this declaration. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Okay. How we doing, John?
Well, I'm going to have to sit over there because the mouse is there. I'm going to change my slides. I too must apologise for being late. I spent most of my morning with pastoral cleanliness, dealing with mutual aid practices, plus this new training program, which is going to be a part of the discussion towards the end of this meeting. What I've done for council, I've got some handouts that you can look at. Some of those about the new training programs, some about the costs. I did this, there's a 5-year budget in there for the training, the training budget, which I've just given Jenna. This was on the advice of Council today that we should do a spreadsheet for my budget, and when I did it, there was a few shocks with it.
Great. Do you have an extra that for the back?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I have. Thank you. So, just to let everyone know who I am, I'm John Marmot, I'm Lancashire Deputy Fire Chief. Some of my credentials up in firefighting for 36 years, 16 years in the UK with London Fire, and I'm just starting my 21st year with Lansfield. I've been working with Tom Witts, my chief, for 13 years, I believe. My job description at the moment is Chief for Operations and Training. I was a training officer for a while, and with just taking on the fire inspections, Tom decided that I should drop the training and concentrate on the operations side of it. I still get involved with training. I like to oversee it. I like to see it's being done properly. And there's been a few changes most recently from the Fire Commissioner, which I'll get into as I get through my presentation. For the residents here, that's our new fire truck, and I believe Tom said it's in Vancouver now. So we're just getting that pretty soon. And then we'll start training on it. Whoops. Oh, some of the budget priorities I have, and Tom and I seem to work together when we provide our budget, is obviously training. That's always been my top of my list, because training is important to us, and it's one of the most expensive budgets we have as regards financial terms. And also we've got a first responder budget as well. We have first responders that obviously do the medical aid part of it. And again, another expensive budget. Equipment repair and maintenance, everything we use has to be repaired and maintained to ensure it works for us at the time we need it. Firefighting supplies, there again, there are consumables, could be anything to new foam, new equipment, small tools, sort of things like that. Building repairs, again, we've got a big building up there, first built in 1986, needs upkeep. Vehicle maintenance, again, important issues that we have to look at. Will get very expensive. As you know, if you take a car into service now, you're paying $100 an hour. But when you take a fire truck in for repair, it's a lot more money. Communication equipment, definitely for us, is a big thing on the fire ground. Safety, we need good communications equipment. Remuneration, we do get paid, and I think it's essentially we need to be paid a fair wage for doing what we do. It's being expressed not often now. Like I attended the Train Officers Convention in Parksville, and one of the guest speakers said, you have to reward your volunteers. You have to, otherwise they won't keep coming through the door. The other thing we do now is something we started a couple of years ago, is fire inspections. This is mostly for commercial residences, and also public education. We do a high prevention. We do all of that as well. So if everybody drives past our hall, that's our hall. As I said, built in 1986. Employees, 8 officers. We did lose 1 lieutenant, and at the moment we've stayed at 8 officers. 22 active firefighters. Vehicle fleet, you see there E4, that's the truck that we will lose once the new truck arrives. E1, which is our front pumper line. Engine 6, engine 5, the Rescue 3. Rescue 3 is our medical aid truck and carries majority of extrication equipment. We have a duty truck, which the chief normally has, except for the weekends when I then put a junior officer on that truck, so it gives Tom a break at the weekends. One of the things we're really looking at maybe getting, and is a public education vehicle, because then you can put all the stickers on it, you know, smoke alarms, save lives, etc. That's something I'm working on. Just a little bit about training. One of the things I brought with me from England was that you train until you can't get it wrong, not until you can get it right. If you get it right the first time, it doesn't mean to say you got it right. That's one of the mottos I brought from England, and I'm finding they use it mostly in Canada now. So the one on the right is an extrication practice I set up on our JAWS pad. So that's one of the things we do. We had an extrication call last night where we had to use the JAWS to get this lady out of a car that flipped it over by the new spider. Next one is medical aid. A lot of our calls are medical aid. Mansfield's got an aging population, so 75% of our calls are medical aid. The next picture you'll see is our guys at the live fire building in Nilo. We do try and do live fire every year just to keep everybody brushed up on their skills and just to give them some idea what it's like inside a structure that's on fire. These are real life scenarios. You may remember last year when the highway got backed up for about 6 hours. And this was the cause of those 2 big trucks. That was in the nuisance area, so we didn't get involved. The bottom one is an incident on Mansell Road, which was ours. Again, this was a guy that obviously drinking, turned it over and disappeared. This is a structure fire we had recently on Mansell Road. They're not trick pictures. The one on the left is basically what we normally do is we can get in there, we put tarps over the furniture, just preserve some of the furniture, prevent the losses. The one on the right is an actual picture. That place was black. That fire got so hot it almost burned itself out. Because the modern construction now is so airtight, it holds heat in and stops the air from getting in. Equipment replacement, these are some of the things we look at. We never replaced any hose, but I mean, these are things we use quite often. Generators, small pumps, the jaws, they don't last forever. Radios, we need ongoing replacement of the radios. We have radios now that have been there since I've been there and are no longer made. So we need to replace those. Bottom left there you see the SCBA. Their lifespan could depend on how much we use them. At the moment they're 8 years old and they're still going pretty well. We may, I think, get another 5 to 6 years out of them. And again, it's a big ticket item. One of the things we do with the financial director is that for those items like the air packs, they're so expensive, we try and put so much away each year. So when they come up for renewal, you're not left with a big sum. I mean, last time we bought those was $85,000. Now that's going to be almost a third more expensive to buy. Just to give you some idea of the equipment maintenance we do, air packs every year have the flow test done. Again, our costs are going up on that. Flow tests are required by WCB. Our jaws have to be serviced, obviously because we need to make sure they're dependable to use them. Anything on those gets replaced. Hose testing we do every year. Apparatus pump service, the pumps get serviced every year. Ladder testing, which is going to come up next week, that's done every year. Vehicle repairs, as I said before, can be expensive. That depends on the age of the fleet as well. Our compressors all get maintained, and also building maintenance improvements. The building, as I said, is 1986. We've done some things to it, but it still needs a few more doing to it. As I mentioned before about remuneration, this is something we all got an increase a couple of years ago on our hourly rates. When somebody goes away for training, maybe a day or 2 days, they get compensated for it. We give them a wage for it. Basically, it's to replace some of the earnings that they're losing. When Tom and I do the inspections, we get a one-time payment for that as well. That's being paid to us as well. Just to let you know, in Landsville, there's approximately 50 inspections we have to do of commercial premises to do. And we are slowly working through them. They're time consuming. And also with the complexes we do, I do the pre-plans. And what I mean by pre-plans, I go in there and do a drawing of the building, of where the doors are, where the rooms are. And I come back and go on a computer and I do an actual drawing. That will then go on an iPad. So when the guys get to a call, say they go to the general dentistry there, they can pull it up and they have a plan of the building where everything is, the first floor, second floor. And then with that, they have another page which is called the building information. On that, tells me what the building's made of, what it's being used for. And the other thing I do for my own, being sometimes on the IC, is I work out how much water I would need to put that building out. Because it's very important to me to know that if I'm going to use that hydrant over there, I have sufficient water coming from that hydrant to put the fire out. There's a different amount of water needed depending on how much the building's on fire. And obviously I'll repeat myself, inspection reports. with the inspection reports we do, if there's a violation, and we do get a few, because it's the first time we've done them, we have to write them up, go back, put down the applicable code, and so I'll do the drawings. We have a system called FirePro, which is basically database. All that information goes into there, so it's going to be available to everybody who wants it. Public education, we have no budget for that at all. What the guys, we do a lot of fundraising, and we do sometimes get grants from the gaming, from the BC government. We do fire drills, schools, the treatment centre, and some of our guys, in fact, do forest infiltrations. Some of the businesses in Hansville as well. We have a little piece of equipment that we actually can use to get people to do forest infiltration. So you can have to like real fire. It's basically a screen with some lights on it, and you get a water storm extinguisher, and you hit the right spot, and you put the fire out. This is really for staff's purposes and council. FirePro updated. That's been what I call my pet pigeon. A lot of information got into it. The fire inspections are in there, the pre-plans are in there, all the vehicle maintenance is in there, all our equipment inventory is in there now. With that, also we log when the inspection's done, and it also gives us a reminder when it's due again, it pops up on the screen. All the personnel information's in there now. Started teaching a couple of my lieutenants now how to enter incident reports. A lot of the teething troubles with FirePro has been that it wasn't customised for us. What I mean by that, the program originally FirePro got from Williams Lake. So what happens in Williams Lake doesn't always happen here. So I spend a lot of time with FirePro putting my ideas into a program so they can change it so it's customised for us. So now we've finished. It's finished now. It's working. It's working for us. At the moment, we haven't put the fire reports in it. We just need a fire to be able to do that. And I'm not going to say we want a fire to do that. But when you do the incidents, they sort of go hand in hand. Not the information we put in for the incidents is also applicable to the fire. So we're learning at the same time we're doing incidents. You're going to learn how to do it when you can actually get a fire, except the notation may be slightly different. Now the big one. This is a new system, a new program called out by the Office of Fire Commissioner, and it says up there we've got to meet minimum training standards and structures, fires, competency and training. I spent the whole morning today talking to 2 departments about this program, and basically we have to change our bylaws. I've got to have a legal document that has to be signed by the chief or the CEO, because we have to give them, the Office of Fire Commissioner, the route we wish to go. And quickly there, you're looking at exterior operations, you're looking at interior operations, and a full service operations firefighter. What it means basically, these guys can train for 3 levels. So if they train for interior operations, they cannot work outside exterior operations. If they train to exterior, they cannot go interior. So my suggestion to council and staff is we take the full service operations firefighter. So then we now have to look at a different way of training. We have always trained to NFPA 1001, which is professional firefighter qualification. Today I spoke to Mark Norris, the DC at Parksville, and he's going to help me put this online. If we do the 1001, that will cover everything that we've talked about here. It will cover the interior and the exterior. And I've said to before, we're going to do the full service operations. So it means we've got to now, our guys have to do their 1001, which means they're going to get, we're going to have qualified firefighters. As soon as the guys down in the night. It doesn't end there, it goes on further. And I'm not going to keep going. I can send you notes and brief them now, but it goes in even further now with training 102. 474 and 1921, which is officer training. So that's something I'm going to look for. I gave you a spreadsheet on there with some figures. The only figures I haven't got into yet is the 102 part of it. But I'll get to that now. I apologise to getting this late to you, but after talking to the chief at Parksville today, he said, John, he said, you're going to do a presentation about the budget, you must do a spreadsheet with the council. And when I looked at it and did it, there's a few shocks in it. if you look at the left-hand column, that's basically what it's costing us to train, the training part of it. And at the moment, it stands at about $24,063. So that's just the train. That's just paying the people to train. Then you have the next column, which is training paid, which is a step before we pay our guys $120 a day to go along and do training. And the training can vary anything from 1 day, 2 days to 3 days, or even a week on some of these programs they're going to want us to take to meet this accreditation. The next one is mileage costs. You never know with that. I mean, it depends where it is. One of the places I use quite a lot is Comox because they're JI accredited, and that's where I did all of my training up there. So that's where they'd be going a lot of the time. Or they'd be going to Parksville because they've got accredited instructors there. Again, the next column you can see meals, which obviously we provide them in the way for a day's training or 2 days training. And that can vary. With 1 day, they may not get the full meal, they may just get a lunch meal. And the other one is accommodation. It's a hard one to work out because depending how many days they're at training, like the Chiefs going to the conference in Penticton, the Chiefs conference, so there's a week of hotel bills coming out of that. And also there's the Train Officers Convention in Langley, which I hope to go myself, even though I'm not involved with the training, because there's a lot of information that comes back from that. You'll see some items there which I haven't put anything against yet, which I need to do more work on because some of the items that I haven't listed against are part of this accreditation, the 1001. So there's no figure against those yet. After talking with the chief at Parksville today, I really need to go back and try and do a breakdown of the costs for this 1001 program. It will take a couple of years to train these guys, so I'm going to have to sit down and do another spreadsheet, work out all the costs, so I'm spread it over 2 years. But there's going to be some initial outlay. The books down now, the books we used to use to change, they've gone to the next level, what they call 6. They're about $100 each. So if everybody that's doing this program, the 1001, has to have one of these books plus the study program. Now, we're hoping to bring on 6 recruits. They will go straight into the 1001 program, straight into it. That way, the training will be done at Parksville, some of it, and some of it will be done by us. These are some of the items I put forward. And I forgot to bring the thermal imaging camera. Thermal imaging camera, we're looking to try and buy 2. The camera itself, and I apologise for bringing it, it's much the same size, just a bit bigger from here, from my hand to another hand is now. That's how big it is. Unique thing about it is it's now got video on it. So my guy straps it to his jacket, he turns it on, and he starts to go and fight the fire. So I get a recording of actually what's going on inside later on, which then we can, we're doing a debrief, this is what they saw when they went in. Same thing with the other camera, we put it in the Judy truck. Judy also gets on scene first, he goes around the building, does his 360, he's taking a picture, he's doing a video. Now, good thing about these things is the 2 investigations I've done, the insurance adjusters, the case down the Minor Road with the police forensic guy, they're asking you what you saw when you first arrived. Well, fortunately we don't get many fires, so some of the memory, what you see stays in your head, so when they ask you the question, you've got the answer. But if you video it, it's there. You can say, this is the video, and it's good for debriefing, it's good for training, because you can even show these guys, you know, this is what's going on. How would you have done it differently? Also, it takes 1,000 pictures. So if there's something in there that's not quite right, they can take a picture of it as well, which you can see. I wanted to get 3 iPads, but looking at that, we can take off a couple of items because I think if such a small price, we're asking for those, maybe come out of operating budget. But if you want to put it on my capital, I really would like to see those. I've got one here, and I really would like to show council what you can do with it. It's just so much stuff that you can put on it, which makes our job easy. Really does. And again, we asked for an increase in our call outs. As I said before, we need to keep rewarding our firefighters what they're doing. The other thing, the idea that parks will come up with what they do, when their guys go through the 1001 program, there's 8 modules they have to complete. When they've completed 3 modules, they get a pay rise. It gives them incentive to keep going to do the next level. So when they're finished, they can end up getting $20 an hour by the time they finish at 1001. And my chief wants a storage shed. We have got loads of stuff. We need a big storage shed. It's just so much there. Are there any questions?
Councillor
Can you remind me, John, 1001, you said that's the certification for a full firefighter?
Yeah.
So you could take that 1001 and you could get hired at Nanaimo?
Yes, and that's always that danger, Councillor. That you can pay all this money and then guys suddenly decide they're going to go and get a job as a full-time career firefighter.
My recollection of doing the 1001 is that it's a lot more expensive than 8 times 140.
Okay, these are
that's actually my question.
Yeah, right. Okay, and I can tell you now. Is the figures? You see the figures there? It's I think it's $120 per firefighter for each module. Now we're doing it ourselves. We're not going through JI. You can go through JI and pay $12,000. That's not going to cost us that. It's going to cost us for 8 modules $120 per module per firefighter. So the figures there. It's a very big amount.
Yeah.
You see that there's, I think it's about 2,950.
Yeah.
To do the 8 modules. That's the 21 firefighter.
But they don't end up with the seal at the end because you're doing it internally?
No, they do get it, because what's going to happen is, I have to have an evaluator who's got a 1001.
Yeah.
I haven't. So that's why I've got one guy's got an evaluator ticket, he has to do his 1001 to become an evaluator. So Mark Norris is going to do it for us. So each module has a practical and a written exam, which has to be scrutinized. And Mark does that, and that's what we charge.
Okay.
So you're thinking it's going to cost us $9,000 for one guy, is what you're thinking?
Yeah.
No, it's not. No. That is just for that's just for the 1001. But then we get into each guy has to have his first responder ticket, which is part of it.
Yeah.
Alan knows what, and then at the end of it now we have to have hazmat awareness, and we have to have hazmat, emergency response, and operations as well, which is again is a $900 course.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the levels of of what we're going to provide, certainly the community expects full service fire department.
Yeah.
That's what we've already always had in one way or another. The playbook that has been coming for a long time.
Yes.
I think that our training levels, certainly from what I see, the training level of Lanceville is far, far, far and away where other departments, volunteer departments, although I think that we're kind of moving past that term in Lanceville, but other non-unionized paid on-call departments, we're far and away, better prepared for the playbook than they might be, but obviously we still have some catch up to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, but the thing is, being my experience, I've always trained to 1001.
Yeah.
My recruits went through a 1001 program, which is about essential, and same.
I know.
So yeah, I do require a high degree of training, because of my experience, and what I've seen like last night in NBI, it works.
Well, the residents certainly benefit from it, and that's what they expect.
Well, and this is what the underwriters wanted. They were asking for this as well. This is something they're going to get, which will improve our policy and service rating as well.
I might know an evaluator too.
Yes.
Tell me about the 2 cameras. How come 2, please?
Okay, 2 is one for the first right. Normally we have 2. The Julius goes to scene first, so he gets there and does his size up for the camera. The next one is used by the first team that goes in. Once I commit 2 teams, I have to set up a RIT team. A RIT team is the team that stands outside. Its sole purpose is to rescue firefighters. I need to give them one as well. Because if then 2 guys in there or 3 guys go down, they need that camera in to go and find them. I'd like to say 2 now and 2 next year as well.
Just a quick 2 comments on that thermal camera. My understanding is they really help in detecting heat sources inside the cars, inside the buildings.
You've been looking at the newspaper. what Councillor Haynes on about is, we pull up at an MVI, an accident, and there's a door open, and we're not sure how many people are in there. We can put the camera to the seat, and part of the that's to be leave a heat spot on that seat. So if I put it to the seat and it's a heat source, I know somebody was sitting in there, but they're not there now. So maybe they've run away, or they've walked away and stuck into the bush and collapsed. So that's what we could use for.
Can you explain to me the benefit of the 3 iPads?
I don't, that one fire off, John.
Pardon me?
But that iPad fire up.
Everything's working.
Can we show you this iPad? How long will it take? Oh, we're pushing the time on.
Maybe just list.
Okay, that iPad, basically, we carry books on the truck that shows where the hydrants are. We have to go for a book to find the hydrant is. The iPad, basically, we just hit the road, it comes on, it shows where the hydrants are. That's one part of it. The other part of it is my pre-plans, which you've got the sketches on in there, they go on there as well. So I've got a building like, say, general dentistry, I just hit the button, hit general dentistry, it brings up the drawings, and it brings up the building information. There's no end of stuff that we can put on it, which would be very useful for us. Chemical stuff, anything like that.
Just follow up. They're not in the budget. Do you know what that would cost approximately?
We've got, I got something there I can get to, it's about $1,600 for free. We buy it for a corporate plan similar to the way we get our cell phones at the moment. My colleague is, sorry, that's John Westby, one of my colleagues, just finished the recruit program. So cost, I'm wrong, it's $1,300 for 3 iPads. That's including some of the apps that we put on it. Some of the apps are free. I've already set my own iPad up just as a practical demonstration. But then there is a fee, a quarterly fee we have to pay TELUS as well, which is like a lease on it, which lasts for 2 years. So after 2 years, you can then say, there's a new model out there, now we don't want those for the new model. That's a cool thing.
Okay. Further questions from council?
Thanks.
Okay. Actually, I've just got a quick question just related to the budget side of things, and maybe this is to Jed, I'm not sure. The summary, and I don't know if you've seen this before, the summary from Deputy Chief Marmot appears to kind of total about 54,000, including training, paid meals, accommodation, etc. The budget request is 15. Is the difference the training pay?
No, I've never seen this summary, so I haven't had an opportunity to reconcile what was presented on page 81 of the agenda package,
Yeah.
which shows a total of 42 being requested,
Okay.
and the budget has been 27. So that's where the increase of 15 came from. So I'll have to review this and see what the difference is, because that 42 did reflect training pay for what was allocated.
Sorry, just one more question. Through you to Tom or Fred, or Tom or John. The new fire truck, you mentioned it, is it fully equipped? Is it ready to go when it gets here, or is it going to need more equipment?
There'll be a fair bit of training going to happen because it's technically quite different from what we've got. And there is some fair bit of equipment as typically happens. We need to transfer from the older truck to the new truck. That will take some time, evening work parts or whatever, to get that equipment over, put hose load on it, and just generally finish equipping it. It's basically a shell. It does come with all the fixed equipment we want, but there's the only additional is a generator that's going on in Vancouver, 1,000 feet of 4-inch hose, which we do not have a spare truckload of 4-inch hose. We can do that for any other size hose, but not 4-inch, so that was in the truck. And lastly, the third thing is the radios are being installed in Vancouver. So when it gets here, we'll have a truck that will need additional hose load, the fire extinguishers, the forcible entry tools, the hydraulic rescue equipment, all that stuff.
How much is
Which
that?
we have.
Oh, we do have it.
Yes.
Okay.
Simply being relocated within the vehicles in the mall.
Okay.
Just as a note, just looking at the summary that Deputy Chief Marmot put in versus the financial plan request form, items, for example, is the new engine training, 3 days for each firefighter of 10,800 does not appear to be in the financial plan request, but it is in Deputy Chief Martin's summary, so that is. Is it? No, no,
I don't know, it was in here.
On page 81, it's reflected as $9,720, right
Oh,
in the
that's
middle of
one
the
of the
page.
same. Okay. Okay, so there must be some other differences there. Okay, with regards to what council has heard regarding the fire department, let's kind of start with the training budget side of things. What is council's will with respect to it, recognizing there's 27,000 currently in the budget? Councilor Scott?
I think it's great work the fire department does and everything. I sort of guess my breath's getting taken away a little bit by my calculations were actually, I think, $54,000 or $58,000, sorry, with the total training budget. When I added up everything, including accommodation, shown on the side. So that's a very, very significant increase. I mean, maybe we can't do everything this year. Obviously, the base is set there. I think one of the things we do have to consider is we're bringing a new engine on, we have to train people on that. I think that's things like that, in particular, are one-time costs, and maybe that's something that we were talking before coming out of the surplus because of the one-time item. I think we definitely have to train people on it, so there's additional costs there. Moving beyond that, I start really struggling, and maybe we have to start inching that training budget up, but to go from 27,000 to 58,000 is a huge hit, especially if we don't know what's happening with fire chief and everything like that as well.
Councilor Milburn?
Personally, I'd appreciate some more time to digest all of this. There's a lot of some difficult choices and technical information, and I probably need a little more time to think about it for my preference.
Okay, so would council like to kind of move this item forward until future consideration?
Why is we could. I was just gonna say, I'd like to put the iPads on the list too. We're gonna talk about it all in the future, but I want to see that get dropped. So if we could add in those 3 iPads onto the expenditures, the list.
Just keep in mind, we are on the training budget.
Oh, I think you're talking about all of it.
Specific. Councilor Folsom?
Just further to that, if we could get an updated detail, including all the aspects or all the items that were brought forward tonight, so we can reflect on the all-in costs again. Decide on that.
So how about if we direct staff, the deputy chief and staff to kind of reconcile the 2 lists and identify that and then bring it back to us?
Sure.
Acceptable?
Motion?
Do you need a motion or just direction?
A motion, please.
Absolutely not.
Councilor Hames, second by Councilor Newberry, discussion on motion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Now, there are some other specific items regarding the fire department, so the annual increases to hourly practice and call-out pay. There's a report there with regards to it and whether or not to increase rates. Councilor Milburn?
My comment about more time to digest and follow the fire department. So, I mean, I can repeat that, but I sort of feel like I need to see how everything fits together, because there's just a lot here.
Okay, so is that the wish of council? Okay, so for the next financial planning meeting, I guess, some additional consideration. Do note there were some couple other items I wanted to raise just based on quickly glancing what John's done here. For example, and this is a question to the department. There's a mention here about painting apparatus, walls and ceiling, and it says if we go ahead with the new bunker gear lockers, I seem to remember years ago there being a discussion about lockers regarding turnout gear. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, that's something that was put in about 3 years ago. I never heard anything from it.
So nothing's been done with regards to that? Do you know an approximate cost?
The original figure was about $12,000. But after visiting Comox and seeing what they use, a rough estimate, I think we get about $4,000. But I need to discuss with my guys whether they're gonna really like what I want to put out. It needs their approval. I mean, but it is a cheap way.
Okay, maybe it's just part of that further information, we can get something additional on that.
All right.
Anything else from council? Okay, is that enough? Do we know where we're going?
I'll just add one comment on
Yeah.
that last question, is the fire department has about $7,500 in their building maintenance budget each year that is meant to just capture one or two or more small projects rather than always pulling it out of reserves. So that locker refurbishment replacement was identified as one of the projects for this year. So it is essentially already reflected in the financial plan to
Oh,
go
okay.
with that. Yeah, right.
Okay. Councillor Scott?
Through to the deputy fire chief. One of the alternatives for the fire hall storage was the mezzanine. And to me, that almost seems like maybe it's a better idea because it's right inside the building, we can provide additional space as well.
Yeah, that's Tom's project.
And, you know, they're not cheap. I know they're not cheap, but I'd be more than happy to investigate costs and workshop on that. It would be a case of a steel floor midway over the, called the regular corner bay that would certainly provide probably more floor area than the 13 by 13 exterior construction of the position. But being all steel, it can be costly.
Okay.
I can see what I can do there.
Okay. Okay, anything further on the fire department? Nothing, if we kind of move ahead to, there's some transportation services requested items. First is the asphalt replacement, Linecrest Terrace, Park Crescent, Sebastian Road, and the Lanes and Lane.
So
I'm assuming the whole thing? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Scott, do you have a second? Councillor Savage? Discussion. Councillor Colson.
Of the $295,000 noted for this one, what is the approximate component of that for Linecrest Terrace? For milling out and repaving it?
I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I think it was around 145. You can see that. There is some other drainage works that have to be done on Linecrest as well.
Sorry,
The drainage works, yeah, replacing a few culverts along there. That is a part of the road construction.
Any further questions? Councillor Scott, this is you.
I was just gonna say that I'm just looking at this as part of our capital maintenance plan, that we have a road network plan with reserves that basically do projects every year, so that's why it's important.
Councillor Haynes.
I'll save it for next time, we'll get it.
Just a quick question to staff. Under the alternatives, it says staff has addressed these projects as the highest priority within budget parameters for 2015. Why is it got the statement within budget parameters as opposed to just the highest priority?
Because there's other projects out there that are as high a priority, but we'd never be able to afford them at this time. So we're trying to plan in the future for those ones as well.
Okay.
The priorities are very similar, but these ones work within the budget.
Okay. Okay. Any further on the motion? Nothing. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Culvert replacement, Phantom Road. $125,000 with regards to properly work performed at Phantom Road from west to east. Councillor Hutchinson.
Just for discussion.
Okay, so moving the item, we have a seconder. Second by Councillor Scott. Discussion. Councillor
Yeah,
Savage.
through you to Mr. Spears. So, a couple of broadcasts downstream, the drainage flow is downstream from foothills. Is that correct? Do you recall whether that drainage course was impacted by the capital course that they did on that site? So in other words, if they start their improvements on that site, would they discharge the drainage flow to Copper Creek?
According to our standards and specs in bylaw 55, all runoff is be kept on site. Any water runoff is to be taken care of on site. So
But it's true, so.
yeah, there should be no increase in water from the development on the bylaws.
Thanks.
Further discussion? Just the Councillor Scott and Councillor Coulson.
I'm just gonna, through you to staff, seems like a lot for, it's probably a 32-inch culvert. Is there a significant amount of other works that are involved with it, asphalt works? Or?
Yeah, we have to actually physically take out the old one and rebuild it, and it is very close to the hydro line that runs underground through there. And then there's a big manhole right adjacent to the culvert that's on the hydro as well. In addition, it's actually environmentally sensitive areas.
Councillor Coulson.
The alternative, the alternative listed was defer replacement to a future year. Given the consequences listed, is that option? How bad is the road washout, the risk of flooding, and so forth?
With every project we do or don't do, council will take on a level of risk. If council is comfortable taking on a higher level of risk, we can postpone any project. This project in particular is a very high level of risk because we've already had it wash out once, and it'll continue to do so until we replace it. Whether or not, staff have made it a point of going by there on a daily basis now to ensure that there's no sinkholes happening anymore. We are adding material to the areas where there's sinkholes actually occur.
Councillor Hammond, Councillor Miguel.
Does this quote also include the traditional contingency amount?
It's 10%. Yeah.
10%?
10% and the engineering fee as well.
Councillor Miguel.
Thank you. So you're increasing the culvert size by about 25%, it looks like there. So what level of flow event are you planning for? Like we going from a 50-year to a 100-year flow event here?
Yeah, every culvert we replace, we actually go to the 100-year level.
Okay, but the 600 mil was not built to a 100-year standard?
It was just put in at the time to say whatever it was.
Yeah, looked good. Okay, thanks.
One of those designs right. Okay, any further on the motion? Nothing else? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carried. Just question the staff with regards to recognizing the time when it comes to it. Defer the items to a further count.
That's correct, March 2nd.
So is the March 2nd going to allow us time frame wise and all that, if anything, it's not going to raise any issues?
Nope.
Okay, Councillor Hammond.
Could I ask for another report? I see that the fire department gets a detailed report that shows the expenditures by account. And it's just a computer printout, so it would be easy to get. And I think it would give us that analysis that would allow us to really see the trends and what's going on. It's only 25 pages. So can I make a request that we get that for the March 2nd or before if we could?
Staff?
I can give you a copy of it, Jenna, if you want.
Is it just for the fire department?
Well, this copy I have is for them, but I'd like to get it for our financial budgeting process.
So basically, it's a more detailed,
Yeah, it's just this, but it's only 25 pages.
based on.
Yeah, but it says theirs is only 3 pages of 25.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
so the whole report would be 25
So that
pages.
would be every GL account that we have in the district.
Yeah, but just summary of it.
maybe just,
Doesn't
oh,
give the
not the
detail.
detail.
No, I realize that.
Yeah,
Is that
Okay.
possible?
great, thank you. Could we get it before March the 2nd?
Oh, yeah, we'll have to look at the workload. We're pretty taxed right now, but we'll try.
Yeah, it's just a computer, push it
Well,
up.
it just
Okay.
depends on
Yeah,
the.
it depends on workload.
Mhm.
Okay, we get a motion to defer the additional items to the next cow. Councillor Nader, seconded by Councillor Coulson. All in favor, sorry, discussion, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. We will do public participation if that's all right with council. Name and address, please. for the
Linda
record.
Westby, 803 Sullivan. Through Mayor to, I believe it's a question for staff.
I don't have the page number, but it was the chart reporting, revenue from taxation. And I noticed that the business commercial number was much lower for 2015 as opposed to 2014, and the residential, I think, a little bit. Is that because we've lost businesses, or was the business rate increased?
I'm not sure exactly what.
Page 51, I think. Being approved.
Are you comparing it to last year?
Yeah.
So that shows the percentage of district assessment and percentage of property tax revenue. So you're asking about the percentage of property tax revenue?
I believe that's it. I haven't got the sheet with
Yeah.
me, but it had gone down for this. I'm just asking, did we lose businesses or did the tax rate change?
Well, it could be neither. It could be that the assessment has changed, right? Like the taxes generated, the percentage of the tax revenue is determined both by the tax rate and individual assessments.
Okay, so
So-
property tax, residential may have gone up a bit in business. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Further public participation. Okay, seeing no additional public participation, if we get a motion to adjourn. Councillor Scott, Councillor Haney, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries.